What's up? How's it going? Thad Brown here with you on the Endgame. It is Monday, February the 16th. Hope everybody had a great Valentine's Day weekend. Weather not too bad in Western New York. Kind of warm today, actually, 40 degrees. I went to a golf simulator today, played 16 holes at Oakmont. Yeah, it wasn't real, and we're not really even close to golf season here in Rochester, but it felt damn good. So I enjoyed myself this morning, got some swings in. The game is about where you'd expect it to be. Got a lot to get to, as always, here on a Monday. We're going to talk about the Bills adding some coaches. John Fox is in. How much of an effort or a difference will that make for Joe Brady in year number one? Deion Dawkins. We talked a little bit about a potential Deion Dawkins trade on Thursday. I want to dive a little more into that today. And then we'll talk about the All-Star games, the Olympics, which are kind of like the ultimate All-Star games. Which ones are hitting, which ones are kind of missing, and why the Olympics might work a little better in this era of television than it has before. And the Olympics has always been pretty much a ratings lock in terms of attracting viewers. But like we normally do on this show, let's start with the Bills. And the full Joe Brady coaching staff was announced over the weekend. Most of the names we've heard already: Pete Carmichael, Jim Leonard, et cetera, et cetera. The big name that was new was John Fox, the former head coach who's been to a couple different Super Bowls with teams. He came up as a defensive coordinator, was a coordinator for the Giants, about the same time that Sean Payton was the head coach there. So more or less, this is still kind of from the Sean Payton tree, certainly Sean Payton adjacent at least. And with Fox, he checks a lot of things that you would think a first-time head coach would want. Number one, John Fox is the only guy who will be working at One Bills Drive this year who has had coaching experience. Brandon Beane talked about it back when the Bills had the press conference to talk about why they fired Sean McDermott. That CEO angle of being a head coach was something this team wanted to chase. Now, Joe Brady doesn't have that unique experience, but the Bills went out of their way to make sure we all knew that Joe Brady's interview really hit the mark when it came to the CEO stuff, the managing a team stuff. So it makes sense that you'd want to have somebody on staff who kind of has that experience already, and John Fox fills that. In addition, like I said, John Fox has been almost to the top of the mountain. He hasn't won a Super Bowl on his own or as a defensive coordinator, but he's been there multiple times. So now maybe John Fox doesn't know how to get all the way to a championship. But if the Bills went to a Super Bowl this year and lost, that would still probably be seen as a successful season. It certainly would be advancing from where they were before. So not only does John Fox have the ability to go to Joe Brady and say, hey, that thing you're doing, that's not what a head coach should do. This is not how a head coach should be spending their time. This is not how a head coach should be addressing the media. This is not how a head coach should be talking to their team. So John Fox has that experience that you can't, it's not just coaching experience. You're being an NFL head coach is even a lot different than being a Division I college head coach. So John Fox has that on his resume, has that knowledge base to be able to share with Joe Brady. And one would think he has at least some of the answers to the formula about moving along further in January than the Bills have been. And John Fox has been to Super Bowls with two different teams. So this isn't like he has been a head coach and happened to fall in with Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Brett Favre and just rode those quarterbacks to Super Bowls. He went with Carolina and he went with Denver. Now, both those teams had great quarterbacks, but whatever, most teams who go to a Super Bowl do. I know this year's two were not exactly that, but regardless, we know what the formula is for a quarterback or for a Super Bowl, and usually the elite quarterback is there. So John Fox had Cam Newton and Peyton Manning. Big whoop. The guy's been there. Sean McDermott has not. Joe Brady has not, even though Joe Brady has not had a chance yet. So John Fox makes sense from that point of view. And in addition, like I said, John Fox came up as a defensive coordinator. So although Jim Leonard has 5-6 years of experience at Wisconsin being a defensive coordinator, it's not something he's done in the NFL before. It's going to be different dealing with professionals than it was in college. It's going to be different when you don't get Northwestern, Iowa, and Nebraska on your schedule every year in the NFL. It's going to be different when the talent levels on both sides of the ball are much more equal. The NFL is not like college where you can have 7 guys who are 5 stars and were recruited all over the country, and the team you're playing cannot because they simply don't hit in your weight class, even if they are in your conference. I know the Jets and the Browns kind of dispute that theory, but in general, the NFL is much more even. So it's going to be a different situation, a different defense that Jim Leonhard is running, and John Fox brings experience there too. And not only that, John Fox is one of 10 head coaches since 2000 who have been to a Super Bowl in year 2 being a head coach. Now, we talked earlier after Joe Brady was hired that first-year head coaches don't usually go to the Super Bowl. There have only been 2 since the 80s who have done it, and 5 all time, who have gone to a Super Bowl in their very first year as a head coach. So those odds are against Joe Brady. That's not a likely scenario for this year. But apparently going in year 2 is something that everybody can do. Because like I said, there's been 10 of them, 10 head coaches who in their second year of being a head coach have gone to a Super Bowl. Mike McDonald this year with the Seahawks was the 10th. Nick Sirianni's one. Sean McVay's one. A lot of guys, for whatever reason, you need that first year to kind of lay the groundwork. And then in year 2, boom, you take off. And John Fox is one of those guys. The Bills are absolutely a candidate to make it 11 or 12, I guess if someone did it this year, in 2 years at the end of the 2027 season. So now, not only has John Fox gone to a Super Bowl, he knows how to do it quickly. He knows how to turn a program around like that and make them a Super Bowl team in year number 2. So again, when you look at John Fox and think of what are the things you want in terms of an experienced, knowledgeable coach on Joe Brady's staff, John Fox has got a bunch of those things. Been to a Super Bowl quickly. Been a defensive coordinator. So you got advice for your young DC. So I think there's a lot of good reasons to like this hire. And I think it does make a lot of sense. Just simply by where Joe Fox has been and what the Bills need, what holes that you would think they would need to fill on the staff. And the staff, I think, has done a pretty good job in terms of mixing youth and experience. You've got a young, aggressive, brand new defensive coordinator. Your offensive coordinator in Pete Carmichael, even though he's not really a coordinator, he's kind of just the assistant more or less, is a guy who's been around forever. He's done the job he's going to do. He's done it for 15 years. So wild experience there. The offensive line coach, Pat Meyer, who I'm not a huge fan of, at least the resume, but he's got lots of experience. Special teams coach, Jeff Rodgers, has done this forever, 17th years at DC. And then on the flip side, you got a guy like Jay Valai, who's your corner coach, who's never been in the NFL, coming up from college, a guy who cutting edge-ish when it comes to press man coverage. You bringing it back a few guys. Rob Boris got a promotion from tight ends coach to run game coordinator. Kelly Skipper is still here. That guy's going to be here, I think, forever. Just a great running back coach. So the mix on the staff is really, really good. And I think John Fox is a guy that kind of finishes that off, giving you that big picture, long-term CEO stuff. Here's the problem with John Fox. A, he's 71 years old, which doesn't mean you can't coach. But the older you get, the more obviously you lose touch with A, the game, and B, the players. But those bridges have been crossed before. I think that the bigger concern with John Fox is that since his last head coaching gig with the Bears, that ended in 2017, he has coached in the NFL 2 seasons. And basically it's the same job that he's got with the Bills. Some sort of senior coach emeritus assistant smart guy. He's not like running defensive backs or running a defense. He's just kind of there to help out. He did it in 2022 with the Colts and 2023 with the Lions. Neither of those teams were really good. In fact, both of them were double-digit loss teams. The Colts, that was the Jeff Saturday year when they fired, I don't remember who it was. I don't remember who it was, come to think of it. Either way, most football fans will tell you all about Jeff Saturday coming right out of the broadcast booth, becoming a head coach because that was a good idea. He wins his first game and then loses everything else. John Fox was on that staff. He's got to have stories about that year, by the way. And then the Lions staff, I think, was year 2 under Dan Campbell. The Lions were 7-10. And there was some building there. And, there's probably an argument to be made that Perhaps John Fox had some help when it came to putting that Lions defense together. Certainly Aaron Glenn was a coordinator when John Fox was in Detroit, and now he's the head coach of the Jets. It don't look like he's going to be the head coach of the Jets for very long, but he did turn that success into a head coaching spot. So I guess there's some positive that might have rubbed off from John Fox when he was with Detroit, but this is not a guy, John Fox, who's been doing a lot of high-level work lately. Didn't coach last year, didn't coach the year before, had what would have been 4 years off, 18, 19, 20, 4 years off between his last head coaching stint and that 1 year in Indianapolis. So while I think it does make sense in a lot of ways, I don't see the 23 Lions. The 23 Lions were 12-5. So I'll give them a little more credit than that. That was the first Lions playoff year. Okay. So my bad on that one. But John Fox did help with the Lions the first year they really became a threat and made the playoffs in the NFC. Regardless, though, 2 seasons of work of the last 18, 19, 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, of the last 8 is not a guy who's been dialed into coaching a lot. And you can see because of his Carolina Panther connections that I think there's a reasonable theory out there that John Fox was kind of like the convenient option. If you needed a guy who was going to come in and give you some experience as a former head coach, the old Panthers coach is the guy who was just available. Doesn't mean he was the best option, and maybe he was the best option, but I can see a skeptic saying, they got a guy from the Panthers? Ooh. But they worked hard to make that connection. And then perhaps it was through Joe Brady too. Like I said, John Fox has worked with Sean Payton before, so maybe there's a connection there. Either way, there are reasonable doubts that can be brought up with John Fox. I think overall, though, I will land on the spot of he has this experience in multiple areas where the Bills are deficient. Experience head coaching wise, experience defensive coordinator wise, experience getting to a Super Bowl. John Fox has done all those things at a high level. It might have been a long time ago, but he's done them. So I think when you add that all up, to me, that makes sense in terms of a guy you want to add to the Bills coaching staff, even if 2 1-year stints on teams since then is a decent-sized red flag. So we'll see where John Fox and how much he makes a difference. Who knows how much of a difference he's going to make. I don't think we're going to get in October and be like, wow, look at John Fox adding to the blitz package on defense. It's going to be Jim Leonard's show. But I do think, again, I think John Fox as a hire makes a lot of sense. Now, something that a lot of people don't think makes much sense is the idea brought up last week that maybe Dion Dawkins could be a trade candidate for the Bills. And I talked about this a little bit on Thursday. And I've been kind of researching it, looking at it, the different angles, what the Bills could possibly get. And I want to dive into this idea a little bit more today. So here's the argument for trading away Dion Dawkins. 2025 was not his best year. The way I chart pressures, I had him allowing 40 pressures last year. That'd be 1 pressure for every 16 snaps. For PFF, his efficiency rating was mediocre. He was in the high 30s in terms of tackles in the NFL. So not even starter worthy when it comes to pressures allowed. Now, obviously, protecting the quarterback is only one part of being a tackle. But pass blocking has been Dawkins' strength most of his career, and I think it still probably is. And this year, that strength was not much of a strength. He was still good. He was still above average. But this, I think, by any measure, would have been a down year for Dion Dawkins. And I know there are some stats out there where Dawkins is top 10 in win rate or pass block rate or whatever it is. I will, as an aside, say that no matter what pass blocking, pass rushing stat you subscribe to, they're highly subjective. I can tell you all about mine. The way I chart them, if a defensive player impacts the quarterback, if they get a hit, if they move a quarterback off their spot, if they force a scramble, if they force a throw to be early or what appears to be uncomfortable and it's got to be obvious, then I call that a pressure. Some people will do it as the defensive lineman has to be within X amount of yards. I think it's 2 most of the time of the quarterback to qualify for a pressure. Everybody kind of does it a little bit differently. And they're all subjective to a degree. But I will tell you from my eye test and my pressure stats support it, this was not a good Deion Dawkins year by Deion Dawkins standards. Now, Deion Dawkins is going to be 32 in a month or so, a couple months in April. Offensive tackles can certainly play deep into their 30s. It's happened before. But it's reasonable at this point to be concerned that perhaps Deion Dawkins is hitting the backside of the old career. That this season is not just one bad year, that this might be the indication that Deion Dawkins is aging out of the league. And I know it's early to talk about it that way, but that's the point we're making. That the career has reached the apex and is now coming down the other side of the mountain. We don't know if that's true. We don't know if this year means that Deion Dawkins is not ever going to be the guy who went to the Pro Bowl 3 years in a row. It's very possible this might have been just one bad year. It's easily possible, too, that even if Deion Dawkins is on the backside of his career, that his decline will be slow and graceful and last 4 or 5 years, as opposed to being sharp and destructive. But if this year is an indication that the career trajectory of Dawkins is not something that's going to fit with a team that expects to go to multiple Super Bowls and win championships, it would behoove the Bills to move on from him now while you can still sell pretty high. Again, we talked about it on Thursday. This is the year too early versus year too late debate. There is no discussion about whether or not Deion Dawkins is currently a good offensive tackle. He is 100% that. And if the Bills traded him, I think it's pretty likely that there are 15 to 20 teams in the NFL who would get better this season having Deion Dawkins around. And probably a good chunk of them would get a lot better. But what Deion Dawkins did in 2025 was not as good as 24 and 23 and 22. And if the Bills wait around to be sure that a significant decline is happening, then it might be too late. If Deion Dawkins, if this season last year is an indication that Deion Dawkins is not going to continue to be a high-level offensive tackle, then I don't care where you think you are in the Super Bowl window, it makes sense to move on from that when you can still get a haul for it and A, be able to have assets to replace him, but B, and more importantly, make sure that you have a tackle that befits what your season is supposed to be when your team is ready. Because while a lot of this argument is going to be Deion Dawkins' trajectory in a vacuum, the other part of this I think we have to remember is that, like I said, the Bills with a first-year head coach and a first-year defensive coordinator and a defense that's going to go through a significant transition are probably not high on the list of teams that are likely to make a Super Bowl. That is not a formula for a team that's probably going to run their way to a championship. It certainly can happen. You got Josh Allen. He's your get-out-of-jail-free card for most problems. But it is asking a lot. So if we all get together and be honest about where the Bills are and understand that 2026, there's a good chance that ain't going to be the year. Well, now you're talking about Deion Dawkins at age 33 having to still be a left tackle that is commensurate with your Super Bowl expectations. And again, if his age 31 season that just happened in 2025 is an indication of a significant decline, then holding on to Deion Dawkins means when you roll into January 2027, when Joe Brady is firing on all cylinders as a head coach, when Jim Leonard knows exactly how he wants to operate his defense, when Jim Leonard has all his pieces in that fit what he wants to do, you might have a left tackle that can't hang, that can't protect your quarterback like you need him to. So if the Bills can be honest about where they are, I think it makes a good amount of sense to move on from Deion Dawkins early, get a guy in, whoever it's going to be, whether it's a veteran, a free agent, a draft pick, right now. And then when you get to the end of 2027 or 2028 or the extension of that window, you've got a left tackle that's playing at a high level, that's on the ascent, that is in his prime. And not a guy in Deion who at that point would be 33, 34 years old. And you're asking an offensive tackle to kind of hang on at the back end to make your championship plan work. Bill Belichick was always the kind of guy that said, let's move on a year too early instead of waiting a year too late. This is the discussion we're having with Deion Dawkins. And the thing is, the return for Deion Dawkins might be really good. Now, starting left tackles don't get traded a whole lot in the NFL. But there was one just last year when Houston sent Laramie Tunsil to Washington. Here's what the Texans got for Laramie Tunsil: a second, a third, a fourth, and a seventh. They also had to give up a fourth. All those draft picks weren't in the same year. 2 of them were in 2025 last year. 2 of them are going to be this year. But a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 7. And like I said, they gave up a 4. So really it's a 2, a 3, and a 7 for Laramie Tunsil. 2 day 2 picks and another lottery ticket for a left tackle who is only 4 months younger than Deion Dawkins. Now, obviously, when that trade happened, that was last year. So relative to the trade, Deion would be 1 year older. There's a lot of reason to think that if you're the Bills, you should be able to expect a second and third round pick for Deion Dawkins. That is not unreasonable. And maybe a little bit more, because Deion Dawkins doesn't have the whole Laramie Tunsil gas mask thing on his resume. It's a nice return. You do a lot of things with 2 extra day 2 picks, especially in a draft like this where it is flush with positions the Bills need. Can you imagine a draft where the estimate is, I think the number I'm seeing is 17 receivers in the top 100. I know that there's almost as many edge rushers who experts believe are in the top 100 of this draft. Can you imagine the Bills with 5 picks in the first 100 in a draft where there are 17 receivers and a whole bunch of edge guys? You could take your receiving group and your edge group and totally fix them in one offseason, in theory. That's what trading away Deion Dawkins would get you. In terms of the cap, now, getting rid of Deion Dawkins is going to be $26 million in dead money. And dead money is always, it's like the devil. I get it. No one wants to have it around. But in terms of what it does to the cap situation for the Bills, it's negligible. Depending on who you ask, Spot Track and Over the Cap, last I checked, were on opposite sides of this. But essentially it was a $2 million swing. Either $2 million that you would add to the Bills cap that would be bad, or $2 million or so of space that you'd create. It's when the cap is $300 million, that's couch cushion money. It's not swinging either way. Now, it's not ideal to have $26 million being allotted for a player who's not on your team anymore, which is what would happen if you traded away Deion Dawkins. But again, you move on for a player who might be on the decline. You set your team up to build for when your new coach and your new coaching staff is maybe more ready to be championship worthy. And you move on from that player at a point where they are still very valuable, to where they would net you a whole bunch of draft capital. Laramie Tunsil got the Texans a second and a third and then some. The Bills could do a lot of things with an extra second and a third. So as much as I like all of that and think that's all worth discussing, there is one more piece of this puzzle. And that's obviously, if you move on from Deion Dawkins, you got to find somebody to play left tackle. And that's where we get into a problem. Because the free agent market for left tackle this year is pretty awful, at least after you get past Rasheed Walker, the Packers left tackle, who's 26. And this is your classic rookie who is overperformed, who's ready to cash in big time, a guy who you probably could plug in at left tackle for 5 years and not even think about it ever again. A guy like that's got to get to the market. And very often when you have a position group that has one really good player, like offensive tackle, left tackle does in the NFL this year, that guy ain't getting it off his old team. That guy is not getting a franchise tag or some sort of offer that keeps him in Green Bay. Because then Green Bay would have the same problem the Bills would have if they traded away Deion Dawkins. If you don't have Rasheed Walker around, what are you doing? And I don't know what the Packers have, youthful or young guys beneath him or whatever. But in general, when you have a free agent situation where it's one great player and then a giant drop-off, that one great player isn't available. And then even if he is available, he's going to cost you a little bit to join the Bills. So we already talked about $26 million in dead money for Deion Dawkins if you moved on from him. Now, how much are you paying Rasheed Walker to get him in? Yeah, that first year cap hit might not be much, but it's still going to be $4, $5, $6, $7 million. So now you've committed $32, $33 million to play two players at left tackle, and that's optimistically, and that's when you already have your left guard and David Edwards and your center and Connor McGovern who are unsigned. You got to spend money on those guys too. Now, it's not impossible for the Bills to go about this, but even in the world where they were willing to spend on a guy like Rasheed Walker, you got to be able to attract him. You got to have maybe more money than everybody else does, because again, this is the only guy that right now is available in free agency at left tackle. The draft is okay at left tackle. I think I counted 12 in the top 100. There's no Penei Sewell in this year's draft. And obviously the Bills wouldn't get to that guy anyway because they're picking at 26. So there's not a whole lot that the Bills could go out there and feel good about to say, all right, we're going to trade Deion Dawkins because we feel like he might be declining. We want to cash in on that investment. We want to sell high. We want to build our team for the window that might not really mature until after 2026. But even if the Bills want to do all that, there's just not a great option out there to say, this is what you go with. Even on the roster, Tylen Grable's probably the best young offensive tackle the Bills have. Ryan Vandermark is a free agent. I think that's an option, but the Bills would have to bring him back and want to go with him at left tackle. He's kind of played both. I think Vandermark might have a better career as a long-term swing tackle in the NFL, the guy who can step in and play both spots in a pinch as opposed to being maybe really good at one. But there's not an option where you look at the Bills roster and say, boy, that guy's ready to step in. Not like Alec Anderson could probably play center or guard if the Bills lose David Edwards or Connor McGovern. I wouldn't say Alec Anderson is as good as either of those two players, but I don't think the leap from where he is now to being an adequate replacement is very big at all. You do have Cedric Van Granger at center. That's another option. So I think Granger's probably a little closer to being a starter than Grable is. Even though the Bills have really indicated they like what Grable can do, I feel better about Granger if you wanted to say, we got to plug one guy or the other in and he's going to play 17 games next year. Granger to me might be slightly as a more dependable option. Either way, if you move on from Deion Dawkins, there just is not the off-ramp to another player that makes me feel good about selling all the rest of the stuff I just talked about. That even if you got a really good return for Deion Dawkins, and if you felt like he was a guy that you're not sure you can depend on to be an elite left tackle come January of 2028 at the end of next season, I don't think there's an option in there I feel better about right now that I'd say, go get this guy. Now, obviously, if the Bills are going to go out and get all these draft picks for Deion Dawkins, like I said, you go get a second and a third for Deion Dawkins. You can draft two receivers, you can draft two edge guys, and you can find a guy to be your starting left tackle. And maybe he's not as good as Deion, but if he's 80 to 90% of Deion by the end of 2027, and then you also have these receivers and these edge guys too, I would call that worth it. But that's still asking for a lot of things to go your way. We saw what the Bills did last year in defensive line. They spend 3 draft picks on D linemen, and only one of them really helps the team out last year. So just sitting here and saying you get all these draft picks and that makes sense, that'll make it all right, obviously is not the full or the end of the story. But I don't think it's crazy to discuss Deion Dawkins as a trade candidate because of the way he played last year and his age. And I think the fact that this team probably is not, at least it's not set up for 2026 to be its best year. One would think that after a year of experience and knowledge and transition on defense, that 2027 would be a more likely season, and then 28 and 29, everything after that, for this team to be really good then. And that's why moving on from Deion Dawkins now, why you can get a lot for him, and why you have time to plug somebody else in and let them mature into the left tackle you need when you're going to be a championship team in 27 and 28 and beyond. That's where it makes sense. I just don't see who that guy is. And that's the problem. There really isn't an easy answer to say, other than Rasheed Walker, who I think would make a lot of sense if you can sign him and if he even becomes available. But that's betting a lot on going to chase one free agent who every team that has any desire to improve at left tackle will be absolutely after. And the Bills, no matter what they do salary cap wise, and there's a lot of levers they can pull to create space, to give themselves flexibility, they're not going to be team A1 when it comes to salary cap space and overspending on a guy like Rasheed Walker. So while, again, I do think it makes some sense to think about Deion Dawkins as a guy you want to trade away, because there just isn't the adequate replacement, it's hard for me to really bang the table for that idea. All right, let's take a break. When we come back here, we're going to talk a little bit about the All-Star Games. It was fun over the weekend. Olympics have been cool. I'm not into the Olympics much. I'll explain why after this. And then Rachel Liebert will be along too. We'll do our weekly edition of You See This to talk about something that caught our eye over the weekend. My name is Thad Brown. This is Rock One. People who really want to be formal about everything in life call it Rochester First. But really the cool kids say it's Rock One. We got more Endgame coming up after a break. Stay with us, please. Thad Brown back here with you on the Endgame. Talked a little bit about the Deion Dawkins trade idea in the first half hour here. I do, again, think that Deion Dawkins did not have the kind of year you want him to have. So there's some concern there, but I don't want to actually, I think I've just talked about it quick. I don't want to move on totally quickly from the idea that offensive line is not like a receiver or corner where once you turn 30, you're done. There's a number of guys who've played 35, 36, 37 years old. Jason Peters, I think, is still playing at like 48 or wherever he's at. So just because Deion had one bad year doesn't mean his career is done or it should be dismissed. But we are at that point where I think it's at least a discussion point. Speaking of moving on, by the way, Dolphins got rid of a couple players today. Bradley Chubb and Tyreek Hill were both released to create salary cap room. And immediately, anytime a guy becomes available, of course, every Bills fan on social media is wondering, should the Bills go grab that guy? And I think Tyreek Hill, that's an easy no. The injury he suffered last year was so gruesome. I don't want any part of having to deal with a guy like that in year one after that injury, especially when you think about all the off-field baggage that Tyreek Hill brings. And not just on his own. There's a little bit of unfun feelings from Bills fans dealing with that guy as a Kansas City player and then as a Miami player. So it just doesn't work on a number of levels. Also, the Bills just moved on from Stephon Diggs. I know they're probably going to have to go out, and if they want to really add an elite number one receiver, they're probably going to have to bite the bullet on a guy who isn't maybe super team culture friendly. But there are better versions of that than Tyreek Hill. So Tyreek Hill is not a guy that I think the Bills want to mess with. Bradley Chubb was the other one that was released by the Dolphins today. And that's an idea that I would not be against from the Bills' point of view. Now, I think Bradley Chubb has always been overrated when it comes to his ability to really threaten the quarterback. This is not Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, and Micah Parsons. And not even really the next level down of guys. I mean, Trey Hendrickson, Aiden Hutchinson, I think all those guys on a down-to-down basis do a better job of being a pain in the neck. Now, Chubb's numbers are okay. His last two full seasons, 8.5 sacks last year and 11 sacks 3 years ago, had the torn ACL 2 years ago, so he missed that entire year. So the sack production has been there. He's only 30 years old, so it's not like this is a guy way on the back end of his career. And he's actually mostly played a 3-4 defense. So he would fit, I think he'd probably be at that defensive end position where you're not quite an edge guy. You're more inside the tackle in what would be like a 5-eye position. So, and the Bills need guys who can fit a 3-4. End of the day, I don't think you can have too many edge players or too many pass rush defensive line kind of players. We've seen what Seattle and Philly have done the last 2 years with just rolling out wave after wave of guys. I think Bradley Chubb at the right price is certainly a guy that's worth taking a swing on. And if the Bills wanted to go that way, I would not look down on it at all. I think that makes some sense. Now, there are a lot of options at edge, especially in the draft this year, so you don't have to necessarily go spend on a guy like that. But I do think you probably want to have, if you're going to put a lot of resources in your D-line, which I think the Bills likely are to at least put a significant chunk into this year, I think you would want at least one guy who you feel like has the high floor. All these edges in the draft are not, especially the guys the Bills are going to take, are not guys that are locked into being elite producers immediately. In other words, this is not a high floor draft. There are a lot of choices, a lot of bodies, a lot of options, but this is not an elite talent draft. They can't even figure out who the best guy in the draft, the best non-quarterback in the draft is, period. Arvell Reese and Ruben Bain are the two guys that get thrown around at the number 2 pick for the Jets. But there isn't even a consensus on who the best guy is, let alone how good anybody is after that. So I don't think there's many great, easy shoe-in edge options, again, especially available where the Bills are going to pick. So taking a high-floor guy like Bradley Chubb would make some sense. So over the weekend, it was All-Star weekend for the NBA. And I got to say, I am not an NBA All-Star fan. I like the league a lot for sure. And watch my fair share of basketball. Certainly pay attention to a lot of it. But I have not been into watching the All-Star game for a while. Could care less about the three-point contest. The dunk contest, everything about it said second rate. But I watched a decent amount of the All-Star game yesterday, multiple games, and I was really impressed. I like that All-Star game quite a bit. I like the format a lot. They had, if you didn't watch it, they had 3 teams. They had one that was only foreign players, so it was a world team. And then they took the rest of the American players and split them into 2 teams. They called them the Stars and the Stripes. And they played a round-robin format. So everybody played everybody one time. And what it was is they just gave everybody a quarter. So you do a 12-minute game of the world against the Stripes, and then 12 minutes of the 2 U.S. teams, and then 12 minutes of the world team against the other U.S. team. It helped that all the games were amazing. The first 3 round-robin games all went down to the buzzer. They all... Hold on a second. They all mattered in terms of absolutely being super dramatic, which helped out a lot. But most importantly, the guys seemed to care. The LeBron-Wemby game, which I think was the World and the Stripes game, there's a play at the very end of that game where LeBron commits what looks like a late May Game 6 foul on Victor Wembanyama going to the basket. He gets a big piece of both arms, catches him on the forehead. It wasn't anything dirty, but it was a hard foul. It was not an all-star game foul. I think the format made a lot of sense because you give each small team a large window to kind of do their thing, to be the feature. So the 3 quarters made a lot of sense. They didn't do any Elam ending, which I do kind of like. Now, the first game went overtime, and that game was 1st to 5. So I guess that was Elam ending. But they just played 12 minutes. They gave everybody a chance to show off, but because the games were close, it mattered at the end. Kawhi Leonard in one of the games, the third game I think it was, had 31 points in 12 minutes. It was ridiculous. It was fun. It was what you want. It was the best in the game caring and playing like it mattered, which is all you want to get out of an all-star game. Just give a crap. Just go out there and do your thing, but do it in a way where it matters to you. Now, the championship game of this thing was a blowout. I think one of the problems that we found out about the format was that the team who got rest and didn't have to play in the third game was just dominant in that championship game. Now, everybody had to play back-to-back games. So it wasn't like this didn't happen at all. But it did seem like the Anthony Edwards-led team, and he won MVP there, they were rested, and they started out hot, and that was the end of the All-Star championship game competitive part. But I liked it. I enjoyed it. I thought the guys enjoyed it. I thought the guys bought in. And I don't know if this is going to be the overarching drop in from the sky solution to an NBA All-Star game, but it was fun. And it was something that was enjoyable, and the games were close, and the guys cared, and the guys weren't just going through the motions of firing up threes. So I thought the NBA All-Star game was, at least the game, was a big winner. The Saturday night, the skills competition, I don't even know who won the three-point contest. I know that the dunk contest got roundly criticized. They're just... I did see the winning dunk, which was pretty much a windmill. That might have been like the third dunk attempt ever. It wasn't like anybody came up with anything incredibly new that took over social media. So while that part of it, I think, was a big swing and a miss, I did very much enjoy the All-Star game. And it's been a weird weekend because there ain't much sports going on. There's no hockey, because all those guys are playing in the Olympics. There's no basketball because they're on the All-Star break, NBA-wise at least, until Thursday. You do got college basketball, which was fun. That's something going on. It's better than nothing. It's better than the baseball All-Star break when we literally have zero sports going on. Amherst are playing too. So there's a little bit going on. But this has been a nice opening if you're an Olympics fan, because there's no distractions from watching the Olympics. And one of the points I want to make quick on the Olympics here before Rachel comes in to do You See This. I have not been an Olympics fan for a long time. When NBC decades ago took Olympic coverage and kind of turned it into soap opera, to where we're just going to sell the stories and everything's going to be a tearjerker about X athlete who came from X difficult circumstance to make the Olympics. Someone like me, I just got bored by that. I want to watch sports. I want to watch competition. Don't try and give me the soap opera. And I understand that, and this has been for every sport, you're always trying to sell to the non-fan. Well, what worked for the non-fan was packaging it up into a drama. Non-fans who might like to watch CSI, whatever, or a soap opera during the afternoon, this is sports looking like soap opera. So it worked for them. And it became a hugely popular TV product, in large part because the non-fan liked the soap opera part of it, and the sports fan who just heard Olympics would roll in and expect sports. I was not one of those people, but a lot of people did. The funny thing about it is, though, the whole idea of packaging sports into a tape delay broadcast to be turned into like a 4-hour miniseries type broadcast by NBC at night totally works in 2026. I mean, right now, I, as the person who looks totally down on the idea of tape delay sports, I'm a big soccer fan. My team is Everton in the Premier League. I don't ever watch their games because when they're on, I usually want to do stuff around the house, get chores done, get things done I'm trying to get life-wise. And then what I do is about an hour after the game's over on YouTube, NBC does a great job of putting together like an extended highlight clip. I just watch that 10-minute clip later on and I get my fix of my soccer team. And I am, like I said, the hardcore, I will never watch tape delay Olympics. And now I'm doing that with a team I like. And I do that with a number of teams. I'll watch Sixers games on the recap every once in a while. I don't need to sit there and live with 3 hours of sports in this world where every single hour feels like gold, where you want to make the best use of it. Sitting around and watching the entirety of a game to me doesn't feel like the best use of my time. Now, some of that's the idea of if you work in an ice cream factory, you don't want to eat ice cream anymore. I work in sports, so therefore I want to spend hours of my day watching sports again when I'm not working. There's a little bit of that. But it's funny that the Olympics now, as the repackaged product, is perfect for our on-demand culture. We watch everything when we want to. You're probably watching this, not when I'm doing it live here at 3:46 in the afternoon. You're watching whatever the hell you want to. Olympics are perfect for that. That doesn't make me any different for me. I've never been a huge Olympics fan. I'll watch the hockey, I'll watch a little curling, but it's never really been my bag. Like I said, too much drama anyway. I'm kind of anti-performance judge sports. So gymnastics, figure skating, which is less about who gets to the line first and more about who looks the prettiest, for lack of a better term, not been my bag. So it kind of turns me off in the Olympics. I can watch skiing and stuff, but like I said, for the most part, it is hockey and curling. Curling's awesome. I'm a big curling fan. Rachel Leibert's in now. We're going to get Rachel Leibert's take on curling.
My take on curling?
Yeah, go ahead. Go. Curling now.
I don't really have a take on curling. I think it's cool that like you can be like 50 years old and win an Olympic medal and just...
How do you know those people are 50?
Because one of them that just won his first gold medal was like 50-something years old.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was like a reputation.
No, I'm being serious.
You were stereotyping curling players.
You could pick up curling later in life and be an Olympian. I think that's cool. I mean, I don't know when he picked up curling, but...
I have played curling, by the way. It's super fun.
Mm-hmm. It seems like it'd be fun.
It's really fun. Harder than it looks, for sure, as most Olympic sports are, but really fun. All right, we might go back to that in a minute, but this is our weekly edition of You See This, where we both pick out an item from the sports world over the weekend that kind of caught our attention. I've got a weird one, so I'm going to let you go first today.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack with mine, but
nice. I like
Kansas
a lot to unpack.
State, are you familiar? I'm sure you've seen this maybe.
I know they're a school. Go ahead.
Okay. Kansas State, Jerome Tang, was the head coach of Kansas State basketball. He was fired over this weekend for cause. Now, kind of the backstory, Kansas State is not doing hot this year. They're 1-11 in Big 12 play. They've used to be, when he was hired in 2022, used to be pretty solid, went to the Elite Eight back in his first year, and now they're just not doing well. So the for cause firing is because after a game on Wednesday, 91-62, Kansas State lost to Cincinnati. And I'll read this as the quote. Jerome Tang said in the press conference, "These dudes do not deserve to wear this uniform. There'll be very few of them in it next year. I'm embarrassed for the university. I'm embarrassed for our fans and our student section. It's just ridiculous." And just goes on to say, like, these guys do not deserve to wear this. He also made a comment. Someone asked him he said he was going to take like 2 questions in this press conference. It was very short because he was very upset, obviously, at the state of his team. Someone asked him about the student section had paper bags over their heads because they didn't want to watch it. And he was like, I would do it too if I was them. And then he got up and left the press conference. So that was on Wednesday. And then a few days later, he was fired for cause. Now the for cause is because of this whole moment he had in this press conference. The athletic director, their statement was his contract references any activity that brings public dispute, embarrassment, or ridicule to Kansas State. So basically the for cause is that he did that, said all of these things. And now he is fighting the for cause because his contract buyout is $18.6 million. And if that was paid in full, then it'd be the biggest in college basketball history. Obviously, with the for cause firing, he might not see any of that. So now he's fighting it. But this whole situation is crazy because I feel like, yes, he said things that were... so I've been in press conferences with him before because they're in the Big 12. So West Virginia's obviously seen them many times, and I've been in front of him, and he seems like a great coach. And I honestly, when I heard him say this, I was like, that seems really out of character for the things I've seen from him. But clearly when your team's 1-11 in Big 12 play, and a few years ago you were making a run in the tournament, maybe you're upset. But I feel like I don't agree with him being fired, honestly. I feel like this is like coaches say things, maybe not to this extent all the time. And I guess if that is the basis in the contract, that if you want to point a finger, then like, okay, you can say there's exactly what you did and here's our for cause. But this just feels like a weird firing, and it feels like the team is doing bad. What's the for cause? There's the for cause. We're going to get rid of him. So I don't agree with it just because coaches say things, maybe not to the extent, like I said, about their players and them not wanting to be there all the time. And I just feel like this was... I don't know. But there is a clip, too, that surfaced from him in an interview a few years ago. Obviously, it's nothing to do with now. But in the clip, he was like, yeah, in NBA contracts, they'll like sign these extensions and then they'll fire you. So they hire you to fire you. And he was like, if that happens to me, my wife and I are going to go on a tour and like travel the world and stuff, which is like pretty funny now, like looking back on it. But you might not see any of the money, so that might not happen for him. But I don't agree with this. I don't think the for cause is like, substantial enough to fire him.
I'm okay with it off the top. Yeah. Read me the things exactly he said again in the press conference. Just what he said.
These dudes do not deserve to wear the uniform. There'll be very few of them in it next year. He's embarrassed for the university, embarrassed for our fans and the student section. It's just ridiculous. They don't love this place. He loves this place. They don't deserve to be here.
So most of that is not for cause. These guys are not going to be in the uniform next year. I can see that.
Yeah. That might be the one line that's like...
How bad are they? They're not like... Are they 1-18 or...
They're 1-11 in Big 12, 9-16 overall. But it's their worst Big 12 record since the Big 12 era, so they're not doing very well.
The worst part of this from his point of view is that if you're in the pros and you're 1-11, you're eliminated. You're done. Yeah. In college, because everybody probably makes the conference tournament, in theory, they could still go on some crazy run and make an NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. So by saying that these guys don't deserve to wear the uniform, you're demeaning your team to a point. Yes. That's the one that really gets me to where you have cause. The other part of this for me is I can't imagine Jerome Tang is walking around the halls of Kansas State saying, hey guys, I love my team. Did you see my guys? They're awesome, right? No, they're not. He's not like walking around singing praises and then turning around and saying this in the press conference. He's got to be the guy who's mother.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So this to me has got to be the tip of the iceberg that we're seeing. And there has to be more going on.
I agree.
To where the school is able to make this happen. I think they're going to win this argument. I get him trying to fight it because, 18 million. But I do think that when you say these guys don't deserve to wear the uniform, they're not going to be here next year with a month left to go in the season, you've probably crossed the bridge there to where you can't come back.
And it says public embarrassment is in the contract.
Right.
And there it is. I mean, and ridicule. I mean, there it is. You're ridiculing your team. So. Here
we are in Rochester, New York, talking about Kansas State. I believe that he has fulfilled the for cause portion of the contract.
18 million. It's a lot to miss out.
Oh, yeah. He's regretting it right now. This has not been a good day in the Tang household or a good weekend. All right. The one I have is not quite a thing, but it was a tweet. So at the NBA All-Star game, Stefan Bondi, I think I'm saying his first name right. He works for the New York Post. He's a Knicks beat writer. Okay. He posted a tweet complaining about influencers being part of the media crew for the All-Star game. And the three examples he posted of terrible influencer actions are one guy who went up to Josh Hart, put on a Josh Hart jersey and then wanted to take a picture with him. Another guy who was asking about Phillip Rivers. I don't know what the context was. Just that was all we got. And then someone else who was asking about Christmas gifts. So let me unpack this for a little bit. Okay. First of all, I think the NBA All-Star game is okay kind of moonlighting as what Super Bowl Media Day used to be. Remember Super Bowl Media Day, all the weird people would dress up as stuff, ask weird questions. We thought it was hilarious. Mm-hmm. The NBA All-Star game, whether writers want it or not, I think the NBA is totally cool with their All-Star game Media Day being that, to where it's just getting attention on its own. So from that point of view, I have no problem with influencers being there. Number two, let's go through these three examples, okay? Mm-hmm. Christmas gifts is weird. I'm not a huge fan of it as a journalist.
So this was like an influencer was like credentialed media.
Yes. These are now, and not just one, multiple influencers was the impression I got.
I feel like I need more context. Like, what do you mean Christmas gifts? Like,
well, just we'll fill in our own context. It's not that context is not important. Okay. If you're asking about Christmas gifts, it's weird, whatever. Mm-hmm. The Phillip Rivers questions I thought were good. To be honest, as a sports fan, if you're asking NBA guys, I'm going to fill in my own context about Phillip Rivers coming back at age 45, like, could you do it? What'd you think of it? I think that's a cool question to ask. I have no problem with that. Mm-hmm. The third one, though, where the guy is taking pictures with Josh Hart, it says in all our credentials pretty clearly you're not supposed to ask for autographs, and pictures are like 98% of that. So I don't care who you are, what you think you're doing, that goes over the line. The reason I bring this all up is Darren Ravel, who's a sports business reporter who, to put it generously, has varying degrees of respect through the media world. He's kind of been a jerk at times, although I talked to him once at the Super Bowl. He was a good guy then. He came back on this tweet that this beat writer was complaining about and said, what's your problem? This is how people under 30 consume sports now. They want to see their influences hang out with people they know, and they think that's cool. So I can give you my reaction. Yeah. But I ain't under 30. You're the resident under 30 person on the show. I wanted your take on how right is Darren Ravel? Because this turned into a big X argument, and X arguments are their own thing. But in terms of how reasonable is it for influencers to be a significant part of the media?
I think it's reasonable, but I do think we still have to hold them to a standard if they are credential media. I don't hate that. I mean, that's just how it is. Like you said, like influencers being a part of these events that traditionally they weren't a part of. I mean, it's happening in across every, not just sports. I mean, it's happening in everything. So I don't hate it, but I do think if you're going to have them there, then there has to be somewhat of an expectation to not act a fool when you are a credentialed media member. I mean, if I was not a media member, maybe I'd feel different. Like, I feel like too, it's hard because I'm like intersecting these two parts of it. So I'm like,
on the one hand, there's your opinion.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, what do you think the opinion would be of your friends who don't have your job? Your peers?
I think they would probably find it entertaining. Mm. I mean, I think that's what it is. That's like the whole point of all of these influencers that people have these followings to do it is entertainment to reach a different audience. I mean, like I said, I don't hate it, but I do think as the reporter in me, it sometimes, not this situation specifically, but just like crossing the line of influencer or journalist media, like is frustrating, I think, because sometimes just like ethics go out the window and it's just like, okay, provide entertainment for us and get more followers and stuff. But in this situation, I mean, NBA All-Star Weekend too, I feel like that just, it's a whole circus in itself. Like it's not serious. I think if it was the Super Bowl or the World Series, like the actual in-game situation, maybe I'd feel a little bit differently. But I think All-Star Weekend is kind of like, this is just a spectacle, I think, in itself.
I think there's a lot of good points there. I think the standards point you make is a good one. Mm-hmm. Influencers are going to be a part of this, and it's okay, and it works well for the NBA. And we should. I'm trying to embrace this new version of media. You know, it's hard for all of us. I think
especially NBA too is like there's a different culture to the NBA than other sports too.
Yes.
That I think is that is very media driven.
But there still should be a standard, and I think the standard should be. You don't ask for pictures or autographs. Yeah, if you want to be in the media.
I think that's like number one. Like if you're going to invite an influencer, you got to tell them this is what we don't do.
Now, if you want to make a fool of yourself and that's how you influence people, that's how you get engagement, I can understand that. And I think you also make a good point about the All-Star game being different. If you're doing this even on a Tuesday in March because it's Knicks Celtics, I'd have a problem with that. The All-Star game is a unique deal. But it was as we've come up against or fallen into, I think a lot these days, the debate between engagement versus journalism, stories versus just having fun, how much both are worthwhile in an event like this, to me was a very interesting discussion over the weekend on social media. All right. I believe that's going to do it for us here today. So for Rachel Everett, I'm Thad Brown. Thanks very much for watching the Endgame. We're back again on Thursday, talking more stuff. As always, see where we go with the Bills and who might be available in free agency as we get closer to March in the beginning of the league year. So we will talk to you again then. Remember, check out BKL Nightly right here in Rochester First tonight and on Thursday. For Rachel and Thad, thanks for watching. We'll see you later.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.